Hey everyone, Gaku here. As you may be aware, one of the things that I do to make money is that I drive for Uber. I've been driving for Uber for about 2 years now. During that time, I've had a ton of people ask me what I think about Uber as a driver. Even people who are interested in driving themselves will ask me for advice, and there are typically four things that I tell people whenever they're considering becoming a driver themselves. Number one is don't use a new vehicle. Number two is get a dash cam. Number three is to carry some trash bags in your car. And number four is don't drive for Uber Eats. And that fourth one has been my advice ever since Uber Eats started, because when it first started, I actually tried it out and I could immediately see the problems with it. These problems haven't really changed, and actually they've gotten much worse. As a driver, I've talked to thousands of people, and whenever someone has an issue with Uber, especially with a previous ride, I'm the person they tell about it. So they hop in the car, they say, "Hey, thanks for picking me up. Let me tell you about my previous ride that was horrible." So I hear about all the terrible shit that happens to people when they're riders. And when a rider tells me about their experience, I can come at their experience from the perspective of a driver, and I can understand why this experience happened to them. Let me give you a perfect example. A while back, I had a ton of people complaining that they called an Uber, and then their Uber just never showed up. But they could look at their app and they could see that their driver was just basically going around in circles all over town. And eventually they had to cancel and call another Uber. And usually people waste like 30 or 45 minutes waiting for that Uber to show up, and they never do. As a rider, you might look at the situation and say, well, why isn't this person picking me up? Don't they want to get paid? Well, this is when I look at it from the driver's perspective and I can see, oh, okay, I see exactly what they're doing. So basically what was happening is that the drivers were accepting the requests with no intention of actually picking the people up. If the person you're picking up cancels on you, you get a cancellation fee. And as long as you've been driving for at least 2 minutes before that cancellation takes place, you get the cancellation fee. So then you think to yourself, wouldn't it be better if that driver actually picked up the person and then drove them? And the answer is not necessarily. Uber has incentivized drivers to not pick up passengers. And they do this by having a cancellation fee that is oftentimes higher than the amount you would get from actually delivering the ride. Now, the second part of this story is the part that took me a little while to figure out, and that is, many times people would tell me that their drivers would accept the ride and then not show up. That part I can understand because the incentives make sense. But what is the other part? The driver's now going around in circles. Well, a lot of drivers drive for both Uber and Lyft. So what do? They're taking an Uber ride, accepting it, and just sitting on it. And meanwhile, they're driving passengers around for Lyft, making money that way. So they're making money off of Lyft rides, and then they're just waiting on cancellations for Uber to get the money that way. Now, this is an issue I tried to bring up to Uber. A while ago, they had a driver's forum. You're trying to run a business here and you've got some massive holes where you're just bleeding money and making people really pissed off at you. And I'd be happy to walk you through all these different issues. Well, they weren't too interested in hearing that, so, well, that's still an issue now. The reason I bring this up is to show you that Uber's policies are not perfect. And in many times, there are incentives to do things that, whether it's on the driver's side or the passenger side, this is an instance where there are bad actor drivers actually doing things that hurt the company and make the passengers have a worse experience overall just by not showing up. But you can look at Uber's policies and very clearly say, this is the obvious outcome of this particular policy. Now, ever since Uber Eats came out, I saw the policies and immediately I said, this is a terrible set of policies. You're going to have people taking advantage of it, and the people that are going to be at fault are always going to be the drivers. So let me explain to you how Uber Eats works. As a driver, you get the request to go pick up the food. You go to a restaurant, usually McDonald's, you wait in line, you get the food, you hop in your car. Then you start getting paid. You drive to the delivery location, park, get out, find the person's apartment. You walk up to the apartment, you confirm the person's name, you hand it off, and then it's just you swipe and say you delivered it. There's no sign here to confirm, there's no enter a code, there's no two-way digital handshake, there's nothing like that. It's just you as the driver say, I delivered it, and then as far as Uber's concerned, you delivered it. Now here's the problem. Just because you delivered that food to the right place and to the right person doesn't mean that other person is going to uphold their end of the bargain, and their end of the bargain is that they're actually going to accept it and pay for it. So here's what happens. You drop off your food, the person accepts it, you swipe to confirm that you paid it. They then go and complain to Uber that they never received their food. As far as Uber is concerned, the customer is always right and the driver is always wrong. So they get their money back, they keep the food, and the driver gets the reprimand. It's a 100% bullshit system, and I've known this ever since the very first time I drove for Uber Eats. Because when I realized there was no confirmation, I said, someone's going to start taking advantage of this. And actually, that happened to me several times, because I'd do these deliveries, I'd drop it off, and then I'd get a notification on my phone, oh, by the way, you delivered to the wrong place. Make sure you're delivering to the right person. Make sure you're delivering to the right location. You look at this as a driver, you're like, just what the hell? What's going on? So I knew early on that this was a system that could be abused and eventually would be abused. What I didn't realize is just how blatantly people would abuse the systems. So I was driving this group the other night and listened to their conversation.
Nobody's taking actually getting Waffle. I'm gonna order Uber Eats and say it didn't get there.
Bro, so as you can see, getting free food from Uber Eats is just a thing now. And you might think that this is a joke, but then listen to the follow-up.
You know
that hurts the drivers, right?
It's really dick, guys.
It should hurt the company more than the drivers.
This guy is clearly trying to justify this action by saying it only hurts Uber and it doesn't hurt the drivers. What he doesn't understand is that it actually does hurt the drivers because it counts against the drivers. Now I want to tell you exactly how this hurts the drivers. So over the 4th of July weekend, I ended up driving primarily for Uber Eats because of some issues with the app. And over that weekend, I ended up with several trips that, number 1, no one was there to pick up the delivery. Number 2, no one answered the phone. Number 3, no one answered a text. I'm sitting there with the food at the proper location with no one to give it to. So after 8 minutes of standing at someone's door like a dumbass, you get to cancel the order, and you end up with a bag of McNuggets that you didn't really want. Okay, whatever. Now, undeliverable orders happen from time to time. But this particular weekend, I ended up with like 4 or 5 of them that couldn't be delivered. In one case, I even confirmed that the person was out of town. They answered their texts. They said, oh, by the way, we called the order to the wrong place because they're in a completely different city. They're on vacation, but they called it to their house. It's like, okay, so what happens when you cancel the order? Well, if it's an infrequent thing, then Uber actually pays you for the delivery. But if it happens too many times, it did to me, they say, oh, you're just trying to steal the food. And then they start not paying you. So now you go through this whole delivery, you've wasted 30 minutes of your time, you have a bag of food that you don't want, and you didn't get paid for it. And if it happens enough times, eventually you get a notification like this one that basically informs you that you're being flagged for fraud because of the undelivered orders. So what's happened at this point? People have ordered food to places where they aren't present. You go to deliver it, there's no one there. You can't possibly deliver it, so you have to cancel it. And then Uber penalizes you for canceling the order. Now, that's if there's no one there, okay? So that's like a legit attempt at a delivery. No one's there. It just doesn't work for whatever reason. You can't get a hold of them. They don't answer. My assumption is that they were drunk and they ordered it to the wrong location and then their phone died. That's my assumption, but I don't know. Because, again, there was no one there to pick it up. There's no way to confirm it. Okay, so that's if you try and deliver and you can't. Or let's take the other example. You go to a location, you find the proper apartment, you knock on the door, you confirm the person's name, you hand it off to them. And then the person calls in and claims they never got the food. So what does Uber see in this case? Well, the customer's always right, so clearly that customer didn't get their food, right? So what does that mean? It means either the driver legitimately took it to the wrong location, in which case the driver is incompetent, so let's write them up, or it means that the driver drove to the proper location, marked it as delivered, and then kept the food, which is fraud. So either way, the driver's at fault as far as Uber is concerned. The customer is always right, the driver is always wrong. I don't doubt there are instances where bad actor drivers will try to scam Uber to get free food out of the system, but what you have now is a set of incentives that is skewed so far in the customer's favor that they'd almost be stupid not to demand their money back after they've received their food. I've said this from the very moment that Uber Eats first came out. I said Uber Eats is essentially running a scam, and the drivers are the ones that are going to take the fall for it. And now we can see that this is just part of the zeitgeist now. The idea of ordering food and then claiming you didn't receive it so you both get your money back and have the food is just a thing now. It's a thing that people openly talk about, and it's a thing that people do. There are some very, very simple things that Uber could do to fix this problem, but they're not. If they wanted to fix it, they could have fixed these issues a year ago. But now it's been so ingrained that this is just a thing that you can do, that people are just openly talking about it. It's a terrible situation, it really is. As far as I'm concerned, this is yet another nail in the coffin for Uber Eats. If you're a driver considering it, don't do it. Don't do Uber Eats. It's never worth it. The pay is peanuts. You take all the responsibility and liability, and whenever some greedy asshole decides to scam Uber, the blame comes down on you. And if you're someone who frequently orders Uber Eats, I'm just going to remind you, there is a tipping option on the app. Throw your driver $1 for fuck's sake, because they probably had to stand in line at a McDonald's to get your chicken nuggets. and frankly, your McNuggets are not worth the amount that they're getting paid to bring it to you. Aside from that, videos are on hold right now because I just got overwhelmed by real life stuff, and it's probably going to be 2-3 weeks, so, sorry for that. I am recording things, but I'm just not going to be editing or uploading them right now because I just don't have time. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.